Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Alicia Keys called Here. You know, I have to admit, when voters on Patreon asked me to cover this record in particular, I was a little bit stunned that there was any interest in it at all. And I think some of that assumption's on me, really, most because I've never really been that incredibly interested in Alicia Keys. I tend to know her more for her singles than her albums, although her first two records, Songs in a Minor and The Diary of Alicia Keys, really are quite solid. And from those singles, she never really struck me as the sort of artist that would really captivate me and get under my skin. Now don't get me wrong, she's got an incredible voice and she's a good melodic composer, but that's where a lot of my praise tends to end, mostly because her mid-period work showed exactly where she could fall off the rails. As I am slid towards more of those frustrating writing tropes that alternated between kind of clunky and juvenile, the element of freedom really felt overproduced, even if I do have a soft spot for Try Sleeping with a Broken Heart. And Girl on Fire, while having a few good moments like that collaboration with Maxwell, it did ultimately suffer from both problems of the previous records, albeit to a slightly lesser extent. And all that is ignoring the biggest issue, namely that for as good of a singer as Alicia Keys is, I've never really been wowed by her songwriting, which never seems to take the chances that she could and can definitely slip towards some cliches. And at this point in her career, going into her 6th album, 15 years in, I had to hope there'd be a little bit more experimentation on here. It's been 4 years since her last album. Surely she was trying something interesting. So, was I right? Well, yes and no. I will say that sonically, this album is starting to take more chances, bring a little bit more diversity, not quite as elegant or refined as some of the songs on Girl on Fire, but rougher, trying to cultivate a little bit more of an edge, and I just wish that the songwriting and presentation overall was able to follow through with it. What Here by Alicia Keys feels like is a step towards material with a little bit more weight and impact, which, yes, that's a good thing, but it's a tentative step, it's a measured step, it's a shade too compromised and safe to really hit me more deeply. In other words, yeah, it's decent, it's agreeable, it's approachable, but I don't really think it's gonna stick with me that much going forward, if I'm being brutally honest here. And I really do wish it was better, because as I hope I've made clear, Alicia Keys is one hell of a singer and a performer. Her voice is somehow only getting more soulful with age as it picks up a little bit more of a bite and rasp, which enables her to step into more subtle and textured territory. And she's clearly got the stage presence and poised to stay a compelling presence across this entire album. And while it remains frustratingly rare that we get some own greater insight into Alicia Keys' own life and struggles, this album does strive to tell more stories from different perspectives, and that requires her to stretch her dramatic range, like on the album's centerpiece and highlight, Illusion of Bliss, where she sings from the raw perspective of a desperate addict, or the desperation that fuels Pawn It All, where she looks to put aside everything to start over and leave that past behind, or on Where Do We Begin Now, where she sings from the perspective of a woman on the precipice of coming out of the closet. Hell, even though she's not really rapping on this album, the dramatic intensity to the faster flows and cadence on the gospel are pretty damn compelling, certainly more than what A$AP Rocky's sleepy and frustrating verse on Blended Family, or on the hook of the closer Holy War. She does sound pretty visceral. Her voice is easily the most compelling thing about that acoustic ballad, and indeed the majority of this album. But if you want to circle back to Illusion of Bliss, the more I dug into the lyrics, the more I was reminded of that song The A-Team by Ed Sheeran, a song that was also about addiction and even shares some of the same fallen angel metaphors. And really, both songs have a similar problem at their root, and that is a certain distance from the harsher realities of the subject matter. In Ed Sheeran's case, driven more by tone, and Alicia Keys' case, driven by a lack of specifics in her writing. And look, I have said it before with regards to Alicia Keys, her writing has always had a frustrating lack of detail, even for R&B, but it's not so much lacking here as it is kind of misapplied. I get going for universality in Illusion of Bliss, where that addiction that satiates the addict beyond the flesh could be any number of things, but better placement on the album might not have been after an interlude where she and Nas talk about adding something to elevate or transcend yourself. Could be sending the wrong message there. Or consider the contrast between the two songs, The Gospel and Pawn It Off. Both are good songs, but Pawn It Off, it feels immediate immediate, a little bit more visceral, a little bit more real, where the gospel is very careful to frame everything as being in the past, which doesn't really help to capture that dramatic impact. And then you have cases where it's simply framed too broadly, like on Kill Your Mama, an acoustic track where she sings about environmental damage that humans have wrought through climate change, and then she slips in that line denigrating genetic engineering, and with someone with a science degree, I'm just left shaking my head here. I hate to say it, but it feels very much like an armchair approach to the issues, and in comparison with a track like, say, Rise Against People Were Here from 2014, it doesn't really capture that apocalyptic gravity that it's trying for. Now, where do we begin now? It gets a little bit better in order to capture the fear of coming out to friends and family and society, but for a song that's played that intimately, it would thrive on specifics, not generalities, and we really don't get those specifics here. Again, it's a little bit better still in Holy War, juxtaposing America's puritanism against its obsession with war, but the writing skids perilously close to abstract hippie territory, a sort of utopian hypotheticals that frustrated me a lot on Common's last album, Black America Again. And then there's Girl Can't Be Herself, her anthem of body positivity and the no makeup movement. Yeah, it's a good message, the universal framing certainly works, but the flighty presentation and the fact that Alicia Keys is one of the most beautiful women alive, it gives her a certain distance from the consequences here, even as a celebrity. She can kind of get away with it where some other women can't. Now granted, not all this is her fault here. How could she expect that on Blended Family, her song about loving her husband's children from a different marriage, that A$AP Rocky would then mention on his verse about nailing his god sisters? But this is where we get into the production and instrumentation. And here's the thing. If you've been following Alicia Keys' albums, this is indeed a step away from her usual comfort zone. Sure, she's got the foundation of her liquid, gorgeous piano playing to hold off the melody, but songs like The Gospel, Pawn It All, She Don't Really Care, One Love, and More Than We Know, they add on rougher snares, scratchier beats, and samples to add more texture. That's before you factor in the looser backing vocal arrangements. And make no mistake, it can lead to some real highlights here, like the bluesier touches on the piano melody and sharper snares on Pawn It All, or the watery fragments of organ on Illusion of Bliss with hints of a sharper guitar there. But it all does feel a little bit safe, never quite abrasive or harsh-edged, and that's before you acknowledge that there's significantly more acoustic guitar across this album as a whole, either on accents on More Than We Know, or driving the main melody on Kill Your Mama, Blended Family, Girl Can't Be Herself, and Holy War. Which, yeah, outside of the last case, which is courtesy of some rougher production from Michelangelo, it lends these songs a much breezier, lighter mood than is always appropriate. Hell, Girl Can't Be Herself or Blended Family would have fit easily within the acoustic touch R&B of the 2000s, you know, the stuff that Alicia Keys was better than, especially in the melodic compositions. I'd also say that I'm not really wild about some of the filmier synths that show up in the first half of She Don't Really Care, One Love, and Where Do We Begin Now. For as organic as this album is trying to be, they don't really fit in that well with the rest of the mix, especially in the former case against the tinkling keys and that beat switch up into a pretty liberal Nas interpolation. And then you get cases like Work On It. It's trying for classic soul with the deeper drums, the breathy backing vocals, the sandy beat, but for a song from Alicia to her husband, it's oddly ponderous and stiff, not particularly intimate, especially when you throw on that male vocal sample of the song's title that repeats for no adequately explained reason. It really takes away from the song. But as a whole, I'm not really sure how much more I can say about this album. Sure, it's okay, it's decent. Alicia Keys sounds great, and she is taking more steps towards conscious material. I will respect that. But the generality of a lot of her writing and the fact that most of her instrumental experiments feel a tad light and safe, that means I'm not as on board with this as I want to be. As such, it's a 6 out of 10 from me and a recommendation if you're an Alicia Keys fan, but I'd point to her early 2000s work as stronger with isolated songs throughout the course of the rest of her albums as highlights. This is indeed decent, I will stress this, but I get the feeling that Alicia Keys could make a more challenging record if she wanted to take the risk, and at this point in her career, there's no reason why she can't take that risk, so we'll see what happens. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I got the poll up here. You guys asked for an Alicia Keys review, so I'm curious what you guys think about this more than ever, because I really have no concrete standard, but from Alicia Keys fans, how we'll review this album. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. But if you guys want to get involved with my regular album schedule, my Patreon link is right there. 3 times a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, you guys can vote on the schedule. And on Saturdays, you guys have a chance to add movies and or albums to that schedule at the higher Patreon levels. I'd be happy having you on board. It tends to be a lot of fun. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.